Page 56. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 23. Genesis chapter 23. And we're going to read the first, or actually really the whole chapter, all 20 verses. So can I split this up? I'm going to have somebody read verses 1 through 10, and then someone else read verses 11 through 20. Can I have somebody read verses 1 through 10 for us? That's why the Old Testament's so fun, right? So in your workbooks, go to page 57 with me, and here's what we're going to see tonight. It'll be your first blank here on the PowerPoint. In chapter 23, we're going to see Sarah pass away. So this is the end of Sarah's life, but there's something about this chapter that is bigger than Sarah, the matriarch of faith, has died. What's really focused on is how Abraham responds to and mourns her death. That's really the rest of the chapter. In fact, you take a look here in verse 1 and 2, she dies. So that's the focal point of the beginning. But the whole rest of the chapter is, how does Abraham respond to her death? How does Abraham respond to her passing? And so really the point of the chapter that we just read is this: God wants us to learn how to respond to, how to mourn biblically death, including the death of a spouse. Now, I've got notes for us to fill in tonight, and we'll get to those, but you guys know I've not walked through that. I have not walked that road. In fact, death in general is something that I really have not dealt with a whole lot in my life. The closest family member that I have lost was my grandfather back in 2021. He passed away with COVID. But my grandfather and I looked up to him. I appreciated him. We had a great relationship. But because I was a missionary's kid, after we moved to Scotland, we just were not super close. That's just, time and distance kind of a thing. So I've never really felt the overwhelming sting of losing somebody. And so while I can look at the passage and pull some principles out, we're going to do that in a little bit. What I really wanted to do tonight was open it up to you and ask many of you who have walked this road, whether it's with a spouse or somebody else very close to you, what have you learned as you've mourned the loss of loved ones, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a sibling, whatever it might be? What have you learned that we can minister to one another tonight? And I'm just gonna let you guys, who wants to jump in first, and just share what you have learned as you've walked this road, because I haven't. Okay. Well, I think that's a good word of encouragement for us to try to remember that and reach out, and it can be as simple as a card. In fact, one of the things I've learned to do, actually more so from my wife, because she has lost in her life. I mean, she lost her mom when she was 19, and so she's walked this road a lot more than I have. But remembering her mom's birthday is more important than remembering her birthday. I'm not kidding. To Kara, if I miss Sherry's birthday, it would be a bigger deal. And just taking time to know that that's going to be a day or a couple of days where she's just not going to be okay, and that's fine, even these many years later. And so remembering holidays and things along those lines, little traditions, that's important.
All of the first are the hardest.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear. Yeah. So let me do this. We're not going to get through this entire lesson tonight, and that's okay. We're going to get through about half of this. Next week is short, so we're going to finish up part 2 of this chapter and all of Abraham's death next week. So if we don't get through everything, it's not like we've fallen behind. I wanted you guys to share, and I hope that this was helpful for you. Let me give you a couple of thoughts that I got out of this passage as I studied. So here's the first couple of things for you. The first one is take time to stop and mourn. Take time to stop and mourn. And let's see here. Are we not going to work? It stopped on me. You're right. let's do... Okay, there we go. All right. I saw a couple of looks like, wait a minute, you haven't gotten there yet. So take time to stop and mourn. This allows us to appreciate the person that we've lost. And I think Abraham does that here. He takes time to stop and to mourn and to weep. Take a look with me at verse 2. It says, about halfway down, it says, Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So Abraham took that time. Abraham took the time to mourn and weep and to process. And it doesn't mean he was done after he got up from that, but he did take the time to stop. And so now, and I'm gonna go to what Charles just said. We often think we need to be strong, especially if you have family members. You try to be strong for the family members. So I'm gonna come to you two, Dina and Dana. I'm sure you both felt like you had to be strong for each other, right? Strong for Carson, strong for Dad. Like you guys often feel like you have to be strong. I sincerely believe this based on the Bible, not because I've walked this road, but based on the Bible. I think the strongest people are the people who do stop. And I think there's something strong about stopping, because it gives everybody else an opportunity and it gives them permission to stop too. What I've noticed that in families where you feel like you have to be strong, a lot of times everybody else feels like they also have to be strong. It's okay to pause. It's okay to mourn. Now, I understand that sometimes there's life circumstances. I understand that you're like, that there might be situations where you think, well, I got to hold on for this, or I've got to hold on for that, or there might be a different crisis that you feel like you have to be strong for. But I do want you to see this. Abraham's first response is not to be strong for Isaac, who lost his mom. His first response is to stop and mourn. So notice that he's not holding it all together here. He's mourning appropriately over the death of his lifelong companion. So let me show you what these words mean, okay? The word mourn here, and again, I'm going to come back to what Charles meant. Charles said this big boys don't cry stuff. We have to be tough. We have to be strong. The word mourn here pictures tearing out your hair and beating your chest. This is something that they did in those days. This is not a couple of tears flowing. Okay, this is a very, very dramatic, this is very dynamic mourning. He is brokenhearted over the loss of his wife. He has walked through some stuff with her for many, many years. Think of all that they had been through. The journey that they had made together, leaving their homeland, going to the promised land, the birth of Isaac after all those years, the whole Hagar mess up. There's all of this stuff, and he's mourning her. He's taking time to weep for her. And then the word weep here means to sob uncontrollably. Again, this isn't just a couple of tears. He's letting himself feel it, okay? Sometimes it's important for us to stop and let yourself feel it. Let yourself mourn. That's okay. Ugly crying is okay. Ugly crying, yeah.
So if you kind of really watching the news, when you see all the stuff going on in Israel and stuff, and you see those people, they do that, the uncontrollable, just loud and throwing,
ripping up their clothes, pulling out hair. Yes, they do, and they're comfortable doing it when they're being filmed. I mean, that's part of it. And here in America, we have a different type of culture where we don't, that feels out of place. It doesn't feel right.
it's like you feel like you're drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah. There's something like that. I would probably feel that same way, but it's okay. The big boys don't cry narrative is not in the Bible. When you see somebody lose their spouse in the Bible, this is the response you see. They take time to mourn, they take time to weep, because there's something about that. God wants us to pause. God's okay with us pausing, okay? Now here's the next couple of things for you. So he gives us an example of mourning biblically. Now I'm not saying, hear me on this, I'm not saying you have to mourn just like Abraham. Remember, we said already, everybody's going to mourn a little bit differently. So don't look at Abraham and say, well, I got to go in and start pulling my hair out. I'm not saying that, okay? I think though that we've got some perspective here. There's a difference between the mourning of the Christian and the mourning of the unbeliever. We've already touched on that, right? Because The difference rests in knowing God, and specifically for those of us who are left behind, the difference is in knowing God. Okay, so there's a lot of comfort that comes if the person who passes away knew God. That gives you all the hope and the peace in the world, right? We know they are in a better place. They are with King Jesus. And yeah, you'll be reunited, and that reunion, like Lynn, what you said earlier, that reunion is going to be great. It is. It's going to be great, and you're going to. I sincerely believe this. You look at the book of Revelation. We'll study this next year. I believe you're going to recognize people in heaven. Yes, they will have glorified bodies. You will know people. They will know you, and you will have a memory of life on earth. I sincerely believe that. I think that's taught in the Bible. And so I think that reunion is going to be special. I think that's going to be glorious. And so there's something important about mourning as someone who knows God and somebody who has faith in God. And especially when the person who passes away knew Christ, that gives all the hope and the comfort in the world. So the Christian isn't somebody, and this I think is the point of this passage. The Christian is not somebody who never mourns. They mourn with the right perspective. Being a Christian changes the way that we mourn. It impacted the way that Abraham mourned. And one of the lessons we're going to get out of this is there's a right way to mourn, and then there's a wrong way to mourn. And the difference, I'll give it to you up front, is this word, hope. That's what it comes down to. The lost world mourns without hope because death is final and there is no happy reunion. As Christians, especially mourning the deaths of other Christians, we have that hope. We have that hope of a glorious reunion. So here's a couple of other thoughts for you. Not everybody mourns the same way. We already touched on that, or for the same amount of time. And one thing I've heard over and over again as I've walked through this passage of Scripture with people and just let people share, one thing I've heard over and over and over, it's helpful to pause and write down ways your life would not have been the same without that person and thank God for them. So that might be a helpful exercise for you if there's someone that you're still, it's still raw, you're still processing some of that. Sometimes I hear, hey, that's helpful, just writing down all the ways that person impacted you, all the ways that person helped change your life. Now, here's the next thing that Abraham does, and I think this is very important as well. He honors Sarah in the way that she's buried, and this is the way we say goodbye. So I want you to notice there's a weird story in the middle of this chapter, right? He goes up to this Ephron the Hittite, and he's like, I want to buy your field. And the guy says, no, I'll give it to you. And he says, no, I really want to buy your field. I want to bury my wife here. He says, no, I'll give it to you. He says, listen, I really, really want to buy your field. He says, okay, 400 shekels of silver. It's like, wait, what's happening here? What's happening is Abraham's insistent on buying a burial place for his wife. And by the way, this is the only land he's ever going to own in the promised land. Remember, God says, I'm going to give you this land and to your descendants. I'm going to give it to you. This is the only part of the land that he actually physically has the deed to. It's the burial plot. But that burial plot is very important for him because he's taking care of his wife all the way through her burial. He's taking care of her. Yes, she's not with her body, like Pat was just saying, right? Yeah, she's gone already at this point. She has passed. But taking care of her remains was a part of taking care of her. That was a way of seeing to her remains as she passed. That was an important thing for Abraham. So it's his responsibility until her body was laid to rest. Okay? Now, here's one more quick thing for you. And we'll probably wrap up with this. Refuse to let your grief over the dead result in unnecessary conflict with the living. I've never walked this road. You guys know that. I have seen people in the middle of walking this road where it's hard and it's raw. I've seen conflict amongst family members as they're planning the funeral, the arrangements. In fact, Kara and I had to, when Kara's stepsister died of a fentanyl overdose, there was a whole lot of conflict on Kara's side of the family about what to do. And that was one we got pulled into to try to play referee. And it got ugly. It got really ugly. And there are some people that won't go to where she's buried today because of how ugly it got. And that conflict with the living, I don't think it honors God. So in those moments, even though the grief is raw, and the grief is raw for the other people too, do your best before God to be a peacemaker. And some of you have seen this in other people's lives. Maybe you went there yourself, where it brought out a side of you that you're not proud of, and you said or did things that you wish you could take back or undo. As we go forward, I think one of the lessons we learned from Abraham here is don't let your grief, your mourning, result in conflict that's unnecessary with the living. So let me show you the math here. A typical field in that day, we have records of this, sold for about 4 shekels. That's what it sold for. A very fertile, a very good field sold for about 40. I want you to take a look here. Verse 15. Somebody read that out for me. What does Ephron say?
My Lord, listen to me, a piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between me and you? So bury your dead.
Right. So he sounds very generous at first, right? He's like, oh, Abraham, take the field. Oh, Abraham, take the field. But they had a rule in that day. Here's the rule. You had to offer it 3 times. How many times does he offer it for free? Twice. He's being a dirtbag. Let's be really honest about it. He's being a dirtbag. He's saying, oh, Abraham, take it. No, because Abraham has to deny him that 3rd time. He says, no, I want to buy it. No, take it. That's 2. Well, if I give it to him again, if I offer it to him for free again, then he's going to be able to take it. So now I should give him my real offer. What is it between you and me? What? Well, just you're a rich guy. God's blessed you, Abe. Why don't you count out 400 shekels of silver? Let me rob you blind while you're mourning. That's what he does. Now, I'm not going to ask how you would respond, okay? But I know how I think I would respond, and it's not what Abraham does. I think if I'm not going to go there.
Well, and unfortunately, you hear stories, when you go to bury someone, things cost so much, or they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I got my plot for my husband, they said, oh, would you like a double internment? Well, when I look back now, I love the man, but,
yep.
I'm remarried.
Yes.
I have a totally different outlook on what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, they hit you when you're mourning, when you don't.
Sometimes.
You can't think straight.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And they'll kind of shove stuff on you that later at times you forget or you regret. And so how does Abraham respond to this? Does he fight for his rights? Does he blow up? Could he have? Yeah, very honestly, yes. In fact, I think you and I are probably going to read this passage now that you know some of that context about how they handled their negotiations in those days. And we're going to look at Abraham like he was a doormat here. Like he let this guy walk all over him. But I want you to see, I think, what Abraham's perspective is. He was willing, he's a sharp guy. He was willing to let himself be taken advantage of because at the end of the day, his mission was not to fight for his rights. It was to have a burial place for his wife. And if that meant letting somebody walk all over him, in this case, I think he was more able to stomach that than he would have been stomaching not having a place to bury his wife, right? So don't let your grief over those who pass allow you to get into conflict with the living. I'm not saying you need to become a doormat. Okay, I'm not saying you shouldn't voice your opinion or your mind. But there's a place, I think, in Scripture for giving up what we want so that we can honor those who have passed and maintain peace as much as possible with the living. I'm not saying that's easy. I've never been through that. Some of you have. Some people can be meanest when you're mourning, and that's not fair, right? But you are right. God on Resurrection Day, if you're cremated, God puts you back together because it happens.
We're going to be decayed.
Yes. Let me give you 2 more blanks, and then I want to come to Amy at the back. But let me give the last couple here. Let me give you the perspective of what ends up happening with this piece of land. So he pours out his money for it. He counts out the 400 shekels of silver. Later, this was the family burial plot. These are the members of the family that would later be laid to rest there. And by the way, this is what the Old Testament talks about when it says so-and-so was gathered to their fathers. That's because what that means is then they went to where their fathers were buried. They were gathered to the place where their fathers, their ancestors, their forefathers were buried. Okay? Now, we'll pick this up next time as we look at Abraham's death. Amy, I want to come to you, though, because I know you wanted to share. Any other thoughts before we close? I hope my prayer is that this has been healing for you. I know what Debbie's saying is like, well, now that we're thoroughly depressed, I'm sorry. I know this is a more depressing topic, but I hope that just hearing that you're not alone if you've walked that road. You've got people in the room who do understand. You certainly have a God who understands. And my prayer is that as you walk that road more and more each day, that God's comfort is with you, that his peace is with you as you walk that road.